participent de sa launch. Donc, et aussi, and a special welcome to the Chagosians who are here today, because I understand that it is very difficult to take time out of your routine to come for a report launch when you have your day and your busy schedule still going on. Donc, moi, je vraiment accueillir ma Chagosien qui parmi nous aujourd'hui, parce que je comprends qu'ils ont une journée bien chargée, ils ont une autre routine tous les jours, mais un tiers est temps pour venir supporter nos rapports, pour aider nous et eux. Merci beaucoup. Donc, ça a fait 50 ans depuis notre dernière déportation. Et nous vraiment espérons que nos rapports pour aider les Chagosiens et les autres endroits. So this year is 50 years since the last forced deportation took place, and we really hope that our report will help Chagosians in finding their rights that have been violated for so long now. Before starting, I would like to introduce members of my panel. Donc, avant de commencer, nous pouvons vous laisser membres du panel introduire eux-mêmes. Monsieur Olivier.
I'm Olivier Bancoul, leader of Chagos Offices Group. Je m'appelle Olivier Bancoul, mon leader groupe Rivier de Chagos.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mausi Shegun. I am the Africa Director at Human Rights Watch.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bruno Stein. I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer at Human Rights Watch.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Donc, nous tenons aussi Pierre Prosper, qui est chairperson de Chagos Seychelles Committee, qui s'est posé rejoindre nous aujourd'hui en personne. Mais malheureusement, il n'est pas ici. Donc, il peut atteindre sa il peut participer à la launch là virtuellement. So we also were supposed to have Pierre Prosper, who's representing, and he was the chairperson of Chagos Seychelles Committee, who was supposed to be here in person with us today, but he unfortunately could not come. But he's joining us virtually. So Pierre, if you can please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pierre Prosper, the chair of the Chagos Committee of Seychelles. Wonderful good morning. Pierre Prosper, the chair of the Chagos Committee.
Merci beaucoup, Pierre. Thank you very much, Pierre. And thank you for joining us virtually and taking time out of your schedule. So Pierre has prepared a video that will show at a later stage, but we will start our launch by showing a video called The Lost British Colony in Africa, which illustrates the situation that Chagosians find themselves in and their way of life. Donc, nous commençons lancement rapport là par une vidéo qui appelle Dernier
E din quando io mi fisi da le due già molto vado. Tu in dove era cittadino? La città era di Atea.
Allô. Bonsoir. Bonsoir, papi.
Bonsoir, Elia. Ça va, Elia?
Oui, ça va. Fatigué de préparer pour venir. Mais des jours pour avion, 3 jours pour matériel.
Diga, papi. Tu vas à l'Italie, tu vas à l'Italie, non?
C'est
Venu de l'Angleterre quand j'ai 15 ans, et mon maman et mon papa finissent Maurice.
En 1960, il faut centaines de Sagossiens, y compris nos mamans, pour quitter leur super Chagos, parce qu'anglais, ensemble avec le gouvernement d'Amérique, tu peux envie faire place pour une base militaire américaine. Ça pas anglais qu'américain, il fait un impact défavorable pour les qui sont là, pour les générations qui peuvent venir. Ça une cause de division de la famille. Bandit leur super Chagos trouve dans l'océan Indien. En barrière coloniale britannique depuis 1814, et tu peux gouverner comme un parti de Maurice.
Là, les Chagossiens, tout va dans du monde, tout tu vis pour une seule famille. C'était là de l'autre, c'est qui depuis tu bol carré, pour tout portager, une vie comme ça. Tout pour une famille, problème là ou tout l'autre, tout ensemble, comme ça.
Là, samedi, je fais cela, tout le monde danse ensemble. Mais c'est vrai, c'est une la vie.
En 1960, Anglais dirige environ 18 pays et 3 territoires de l'Afrique.
Many African states were already engaged in the process of starting to fight for their independence. Mauritius was fully engaged in this process.
Anglais n'accorde Maurice l'indépendance en 1968, mais avec une condition, que l'Angleterre garde leur super Chagos pour un petit prix.
U.S. government officials in the era of decolonization were growing concerned about losing control of the world. So a group of officials in the U.S. Navy developed a plan to identify small islands around the world, and Diego Garcia became the prime island on which they wanted to build a base.
Diego Garcia, ça a une plus grande île de leur super Chagos que beaucoup de familles peuvent vivre pendant plusieurs générations.
The secret deal began being worked out by the U.S. and British governments in the early 1960s, where the U.S. government insists to the British that we want this base, and we want it without any local population. The British government agrees to do the dirty work of getting rid of the Chagosians in exchange for wiping away $14 million in debt that the British government owes the U.S. government.
Par le fichier britannique, je peux dire que si je reconnais Chagos sur population permanente, je peux bien à rapporter ça au ONU à propos de nouvelles colonies qui ont été créées.
What the British do in 1965 is recharacterize the entire population of the Chagos archipelago as contract labourers, not a permanent population, to create a ruse that there's no population.
Pendant l'année 1968 et 1973, le gouvernement anglais tient à peu près 1500 du monde l'eau Chagos, par qui de Maurice excessif, pas de nous soi.
Je sais que le moment venu, il y a le coffre qui met les alors, avec ma plat, ça mène les restes, tout quitté. Tout quitté.
Et mes bandits, là, on fait des gaz, c'est ça, c'est un
They were shipped on boats which were carrying bird excrements, which are used for fertilizers.
Racism shaped every step of this sad, appalling story. You have a group of almost entirely white Euro-American officials making decisions about a population of African and Indian ancestry, and deciding simply that their rights and their interests are unimportant. You can see the racism most blatantly when British officials describe the Chagosians. They are treated as less than human.
It's just this great feeling of being able to see your family again. As I got older, I started to be more conscious about the Chagosian struggle. And with my mom being part of the group, I go with her to meetings and I get to listen to their stories.
Nous venons ici dans le bureau, nous avons une famille, nous faisons la cuisine, toutes les affaires. Nous prenons ça, culture la reste. On fait nous battre comme moi.
C'est-à-dire que nous jouons sans que nous amène sur la peine, nous cause ça. Et là, l'autre camarade, arrêtez, restez, point courage, vivre, nous visons, point, sinon nous sommes malades.
Ban Chagosien qui force pour quitter là, jamais de cesser l'an premier, côté n'a une recette famille. Les restes, tu déposes de Maurice, côté une sépare ban famille pour toujours. Personne ne peut recevoir compensation depuis le gouvernement anglais à l'époque-là.
Je ne quitte tout là-bas, quitte une membre, quitte les animaux, quitte tout. L'église, c'était pas des affaires, t'as dans ici, le gouvernement m'a soutenu. Mais quand vous venez, j'ai un élection.
On est bien malade, les bâtiments. On tient ça, comme on est bien malade. Quand on veut une bourse, une petite bourse enfant. Ça va rendre.
Nous passons dans la case de l'université. C'est ça la casa, mais je vais dans la case Cabas.
Et là, du monde, pas-tu bien content? Tu vas comme ça, zimba la solitude. Mais nous nous sentons blessés, nous sommes désespérés.
Après beaucoup d'années de protestations et procédures judiciaires, Bandron Jimoun Chagosien, tu recevras des paiements qui étudiaient ensemble, tu fais environ 44 000 roupies ou un bout de la terre comme alternative pour deuxième paiement.
Beaucoup de sang, beaucoup la guerre pour gagner sa casse de
Pour recevoir deuxième paiement, tu dois signer ou mettre tous.
The form was in purely English legal contents. That meant that most of our people don't speak English. This is a way that British government just wants things to go around so that we don't understand anything.
Document-là, il déclarait que Chagosien de Maurice peut d'accord pour renonce de droit retour l'eau Chagos.
Mais si je peux dire, pas tout signer.
We are black people coming from African, and this is why we get this kind of treatment.
Chagosien qui reste Cécile, jamais il gagne une compensation comme un banquier de Maurice. Et jamais je fin gagne droit retourner. En l'an 2000, au cours britannique dans Londres, il déclarait que l'expulsion des banzillois Chagosiens est illégale selon la loi anglaise.
I'm very happy for my people because we've been suffering for 35 years. It's a great pressure for us to be allowed to return on our motherland.
Pour quelque temps, Chagosien gagnera retourne dans certaines îles, mais pas de compensation financière et anglais. 4 ans après, le gouvernement anglais révoque la loi et l'idée à cause d'une raison pour ma sécurité, coût financier, et il réimpose l'interdiction pour les Chagosiens retourner dans leur pays natal. Anglais avec Américains fin force déplacement à une population entière, de bloque le droit retour dans leur pays natal, et de fin service d'un motif raciste pour persécuter nos pays. C'est un crime contre l'humanité selon la loi internationale.
I fly back home
most of the time when it's a big event happening and we want the whole family to be together. In 2003, the British granted British citizenship to the Chagosians and the first generations, which allowed people like my sisters and I to move to the UK. But not everyone had the chance to, because there were limitations and restrictions, such as the age of the first generations and the spousal visas. My mom's siblings were not born on the Chagos Islands, so they and my cousins are not eligible for the British citizenship. It just makes me think that if the Chagosians were not deported, if my family, my grandparents, my mom were allowed back on the islands, none of this would have happened.
Il y a à peu près 3000 Chagosiens qui restent enrôlés dans l'Angleterre.
I not want to lose my culture. I created a group called Elderly Lunch Club to give them activity and to forget this pain, to live their lost life in this earth, be happy. Every Wednesday we see this happiness because we see how they feel like free.
I was born in Mauritius and I was discriminated just because my parent was from Chagos. I realized there was no future for me in Mauritius. When Chagosians were granted British passport in the early 2000s, I saw an opportunity, obviously, for a better life. I came to the UK in 2003 in a group of 26 people. We ended up going to sleep in Gatwick Airport for a week. It was embarrassing. We lost our dignity almost 20 years down the line. What has the UK government done to make our life a bit easier? Nothing. Nothing apart from giving us a British passport.
Every Chagosian have a different point of view about what they want. But at the end, when you just think about it, we are all fighting for the same thing, for our rights of return. When we talk to the politicians, especially here in the UK, they always say they can't turn the clock back. But for me, I think it's time to turn the clock forward and let Chagosians return to the island.
This is not simply a history that ended in the 1960s and 1970s. You see US and British officials continuing to disregard the Chagosians and their lives, their human rights in pretty much every aspect.
Moi, on perdu toute ma famille. On dit c'est parti dans sa déracinement là. Pas toute famille font comme ça. Toute ma famille font comme là. C'est ça déracinement là. On est venu penser construire la vie.
C'est pas qu'à sans c'est sa souffrance même passée. Le pays là fait ça. Sa souffrance même passée. Traitement, j'avais Chagos. Retournement, on vit vivre là-bas. Mes enfants ont vécu la terre quand maman en naissance. Ça, on veut bien connaître les souffrances.
When you've done wrong, you have to right the wrong. And righting the wrong includes not only bringing it to an end, allowing it to go bad, but fully compensating the individuals for the terrible harm that has been done.
And we condemn what had been done to us, which we consider as a crime against humanity, because destroy our culture, uprooting our people. It's not a way of letting people live as human beings.
Droit de retour, c'est la lutte qui peut amener depuis premiers jours. Et il est encore pareil pour certains, parce qu'ils nous envie une place que nous capables de nous contenir et qu'il y a un sens d'appartenance que nous pas pour victimes racistes ou discrimination.
Merci beaucoup pour l'attention à sa vidéo. Il y a une vidéo vraiment émotionnellement chargée, surtout pour nous, Chagosiens et Chagosiennes qui sont ici. Mais ce qui me trouve dans la vidéo, c'est l'espoir. L'espoir qui nous gagne le droit de retour. Et c'est ça qui nous espère qui nous va pour contribuer. So thank you very much for paying attention to our video. And it was very emotional, especially for the Chagosians amongst us. But the one thing that came up was that hope that one day they will have the right to return to their motherland and feel that the island where they were born and the soil where they were born. So now I will pass on to Mausi Shigun, who will give us an overview and the findings of the report and the research.
Thanks, Ashwani. Good morning again, everyone. It is now with a deep sense of responsibility and appreciation to many, many people in this room and elsewhere that I present to you the Human Rights Watch report. That's when the nightmare started. UK and US forced displacement of the Chagosians and ongoing colonial crimes. And I would like to briefly describe to you how, where, and when we carried out this research. Human Rights Watch carried out the research between November 2021 and September 2022. Over the course of that period, we interviewed 57 people, including 43 Chagosians in the United Kingdom, Mauritius, and Seychelles. They were from various Chagosian representative groups, notably the Chagos Refugee Group, the Chagos Asylum Group people, Chagosian Voices, and Seychelles Chagosian Committee. We also interviewed 14 other people, including officials of the government of the United Kingdom, United States, and Mauritius, members of parliament, lawyers, academics, analysts, and diplomats. We reviewed numerous documents, including government records, official memorandum, meeting minutes, statements, as well as court records, documents, and processes. We also analyzed dozens of videos and photographs, maps, and other materials. In December 2022, we presented a summary of our findings and invited comments from officials in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Mauritius, to which we received over the course of a month responses which you'll find annexed to this report. Now, I will take you through a summary of our key findings. I have just about a dozen, and I'll like to run through them a bit quickly. But you would have copies of this report that you can take away with you when you leave, both in English and in French. Our first key finding was that the United Kingdom secretly agreed with the United States in the 1960s that Diego Garcia Island would be made available for the use of the United States as a military base. Both governments then agreed to remove the existing population of Diego Garcia and later those of the other Chagos Islands, primarily to avoid reporting to the United Nations about the continued colonial rule of the UK over Chagos by falsely claiming that there was no permanent population on the islands. Now, since the creation of the British Indian Ocean Territories, or BIOT, in 1965, up until 1973, the United Kingdom, with the support of the United States, forced the entire population of Chagos to leave. Chagosians who left the archipelago for temporary visits elsewhere were prevented from returning to their homes and families. And in the early 1990s, the UK government ordered the remaining Chagosians in Diego Garcia, Perros Banos, and Solomon Island to leave. They were taken away on boats that dropped them off in Mauritius or the Seychelles. UK officials also ordered the Chagosians' dogs left on the islands to be killed. We found also that from private notes made by senior UK officials that are now public explicitly show that racial discrimination was a key component of the UK officials' treatment of the Chagosians. This is also apparent in that the Chagosians, being predominantly of African Indian origin, are treated significantly differently from residents of other islands where the UK retains significant military bases, including Cyprus and the Falkland Islands. The UK has refused to extend basic human rights applicable to its citizens to Chagosians. Fourth, we found that the UK and US's forced removal of Chagosians from their homes and islands cost them considerable hardship and distress. Some were initially housed in a former prison in Seychelles, then a UK colony. They lived thereafter for many years in extreme poverty in Mauritius and Seychelles after their displacement, and some still do. Many have suffered considerable material, mental, and emotional harms, which have been passed on through succeeding generations. The UK government did not pass on any of the significant payment it received from the US for the lease of Diego Garcia to the Chagosian people, whereas it did pay compensation both to the government of Mauritius and to the owners of the coconut plantation company for their loss. The government of the UK belatedly paid through the Mauritian authorities relatively small amounts to assist Chagosians in Mauritius with resettlement. No one in Seychelles received any payment at all. The UK, however, insisted that the Chagosians who received these payments in Mauritius had to sign or thumbprint a form saying that they had renounced their right to return to Chagos. Chagosians have told us at Human Rights Watch that they were not aware that what they were signing. The form was only in English, a language that many of them do not speak. From 1973, when the last boat took away Chagosians from Chagos up until 2022, successive UK governments have, with one exception, refused to recognize the Chagosians' right to return and to live on Chagos in dignity and prosperity. That one exception was after the High Court ruling in 2000, when the UK government lifted the legal restriction on Chagosians living in the outer islands, but it did not provide the financial support necessary for that return to happen, in fact. And in 2004, the government issued orders in council to once more prohibit Chagosians from returning to live in Chagos. While UK government officials have repeatedly acknowledged publicly that the treatment of the Chagosians was wrong, none of these apologies have been accompanied by any decision to address the wrongs done to the Chagosian people. From the 2000s, some Chagosians, as you might have heard in that video, have been allowed to live in the UK, and of course more will be entitled to UK citizenship as a result of the recently passed Nationality and Borders Act 2022. Many of those who arrived in the UK, however, found no housing or work, especially in the first years. They faced severe difficulties with UK immigration and other officials, and have suffered racist abuse from people telling them to go back home. In November 2022, the UK and Mauritius governments announced the intention, and I quote, to secure an agreement on the basis of international law to resolve all outstanding issues, including those relating to the former inhabitants of the Chagos archipelago. That statement said nothing further about ensuring that Chagosians are properly consulted on the decisions that will profoundly affect their lives. Human Rights Watch found that the abuses committed against the Chagosian people as individuals and as an indigenous people to be serious violations of international human rights law and international criminal law. The violations were committed against those forced to leave their homes more than 50 years ago and continue against them and their descendants today who are denied the right to permanently return to Chagos. In conclusion, this report finds that the UK government's forced displacement of the Chagosian people, with the active support of the United States government, the continued refusal to allow them to return, the harm they experienced without full compensation and restitution amount to crimes against humanity, including forced displacement as an ongoing crime, persecution on the grounds of race or ethnicity, and the crime of prevention of return as another inhuman act. All of these are serious violations of human rights. We found that the UK courts and others, as well as the European Court of Human Rights, failed to acknowledge and remedy these ongoing colonial crimes, including by recognizing them as crimes against humanity. The international community must not also fail the Chagosian people. The time to ensure those wrongs are made right is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcy, for summarizing the findings so precisely and so concisely. So now we'll have Mr. Olivier Bankou, who's the leader of the Chagos Refugees Group, to talk a little bit about the struggles that Chagosians have faced everywhere, be it here or in the UK.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say that today we are proud to say that our struggle is a just cause. We always say that because what we say that as far as is concerned about our fundamental rights and our dignity, it's something that we have to fight for. And we have been able to continue this struggle. First of all, I have to explain my own story. I was only 4 when my parents decided to come to Mauritius in a view to have treatment for my sister, who had been hurt by a wheel cars on Paris Banos, because there were not adequate medicine there. This is why my parents had been asked to bring my sister to Mauritius to have better treatment. Unfortunately, 3 months after, my sister passed away, and we were obliged to live in Mauritius. It was clear in my parents' mind that we come to Mauritius only to have treatment for my sister, but in a view to return back because all our belongings we left on Chagos. Unfortunately, after my sister passed away, we were obliged, when my mom go to the office to register her name, our name, to return back. It's at this time that we have learned that it will be impossible for us, because the island had been given to America to build a US military base. And we have faced many problems, many difficulties. People in Mauritius think that we had come here by our own. It's not the case. We were forced to come here because to have adequate treatment. As you know, Chagos was dependency of Mauritius. Even Mauritius was under British colony. And people, after our story, we have our brothers and sisters who were on Chagos. We don't have a means of communication. Everything has been cut. And we just learned after that the last group came. And this year, brothers and sisters, we are commemorating the 50th anniversary of this nightmare. How could we forget? How could we forget? And I have to be, I want to pay tribute to all Chagosian women. Respect for Chagosian women. It is by them that everything started. They take the lead in order to let the story know. I have in mind Salih Alexis, Lisette Talat, my mom, and all those who took parts in hunger strike in Jardin de la Compagnie in Port Louis. And also all those who have been involved in the struggle by any way. My concern, I was joining the Chagos Refugees Group in 1983 when they created. I was one of the founders, together with other people, Clément Chatus, which is the only artist that we have in Chagos, and with others, Salih Alexis, Lisette Talat, Claudette Lefad, and all others. In a view, we create Chagos Refugees Group in a view to ask for our right, in order to ask for our fundamental rights who have been banished, and same time to be allowed to be able to return back to our homeland. In 1987, I started legal procedure against the British government. Many people their thought was very different against me, to say that I'm a crazy man. It could not happen that someone tried to pursue, to have an action, a legal action against the UK government. But on what basis I decided to do that? Because I just want to know, is it able, because I have a focus on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, who said on Article 9, who said clearly that no one shall be prevented to enter his own country. And one day, when my son was at standard 4 in primary, he came with his atlas and asked me, "Dad, where were you born in Mauritius?" I said, "Unfortunately, I was not born in Mauritius." He said, "No, in Port Louis." "Where?" "In Pamplemousse, in Mocha." "Where were you born?" I said, "I was born in Paris Banos." "Where is Paris Banos?" I just turned the page and showed to my son where we have African map, where we can see Africa, Madagascar, and point of Chagos, UK, BIOT. I said to my son, I was born around there. My son said to me, Dad, one day you need to bring us there. But unfortunately, up to now, I've not been able to realize the wish of my son. I will make it. I'm sure that the day will come. And the main of the case was, is it legal to uproot the people who were living in peace and harmony and just dump that in Port Louis without any planning? This is the first case. And the case was clear because the points of defense from the UK government was that we were contractual workers. You just see it in the small documentary that describes us as Tarzan and Men on Friday. And the conclusion of the judge was, we are belongers. We are belongers because we have been living there for more than 5 generations. This is why we need to be considered as belongers. And let me tell you, you have an idea of all the witnesses that appears in the document who say that it's something that happened that many people don't know. And it's racism to say that the way people from Falkland get treatment is totally different from Chagosian. And this is why we say, is it because we are from African origin? And I'm purely agree when I have a look in the report of Human Rights Watch, who say clearly, UK and US government have treated Chagosian as a people without right. It's totally true. Totally true. Because they never think that we know about our rights. And this is why, for me today, it's a great day. It's a great day because a well-known organization like Human Rights Watch came with a report to criticize all the bad decision, all the injustice, all the wrong, all the suffering that we have been suffered by the UK and the US government. It's something very important because we have to say that they said we need to promote culture, but we always ask, what about our culture? Did they want to destroy our culture? And what we say, it's totally now times. The right of abode of every Chagosian need to be respected. The right of compensation, of reparation, need to be done to all Chagosian, mainly started by those who were living in Chagos. This is one of the main points that we have to say, and we hope that with this report, they will correct. They always say that they have deep regret for what happened to our people, but they never come with a goodwill to show, to put at hand to all our suffering. Struggle has been continued, and we are proud where we are today. We are very near. We did it last year without any police soldiers escort. We went on Chagos. But brothers and sisters, with that report, I'm sure that the day is very close for Chagosian to be able to return back to Chagos, including Diego Garcia, because there is cohabitation, and have reparation for all wrongs and all suffering that we have been suffering. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, M. Olivier. Il est un peu difficile pour dire tout ça qui nous passé dans 10 minutes, malheureusement, mais si on réussit limite même qui nous écoute le management. Thank you very much, Mr. Olivier. We understand that it's very difficult to summarize everything in 10 minutes, but thank you very much. for being time. One thing that Mr. Olivier said is that many people don't know, and it's true, many people don't know that Chagosians are living in this type of situation, and this has been happening since the 1960s and 1970s. So we're really hoping to scale up this issue, and we hope that we can bring it more to the international attention. Donc, pour M. Olivier, il y a beaucoup de gens qui ne pas connaître qui peut arriver ici. Ils ne pas connaître qui n'arrive à Chagosien dans les années 60, dans les 70. Donc, nous vraiment espérons que nous amènons ça depuis la plus au niveau international et que beaucoup de gens qui connaissent qui peut arriver à Chagos. Donc, so now, like I mentioned earlier, Pierre Prosper was the chairperson of Chagos. Seychelles committee could not join us in person, but we had prepared a video beforehand just in case we have internet connection issues when we're speaking live. So we will show that video, and that video talks about the struggles and highlights what Chagosian community in Seychelles are facing, and that they should not be forgotten in all the negotiations and in all the talks that are happening about Chagosians. Donc maintenant, nous avons une vidéo qui M. Pierre Prosper a préparée, et sa vidéo a causé un peu la vie de Chagosien dans Seychelles et qui fait pas besoin de les autres que nous avons dans la conversation et la négociation tout les Chagosien.
Pierre Prosper, I'm the chair of the Chagosian Committee of Seychelles. The CCS has existed since way back in the early 90s in different formats, but in the mid-2015 or so, around, we decided to have our own legal representation, our own political lobby network, to make sure that the voices of the Chagosian people of Seychelles are heard. In the past we were ignored, but now we are placed in a position where we have some influence. So the Chagosian people are placed in Seychelles suffered similarly to those that were displaced anywhere, especially the first people that came here. I will just mention Mrs. Pivon, who died last year. She came lived in extreme poverty, and she died in extreme poverty with her 2 children. And there are other names, many of them. So now I will speak about the human rights report and the significance to us. There are 4 main findings from what I see. Continuous racial discrimination by the British government, the need for full reparations, inclusion in the negotiations that the British and the Mauritian government are going through, and crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity is a big word. It's a huge word that is being posed, that is being associated with a modern government like the British government against its own people. And we are absolutely, we find this to be the right word to be used, to be imposed by the Human Rights Watch and the British government. It's 50 years of continuous fighting against its own people, against the right of its own people. We ask the British government to recognize this report, to understand the implications of it, and to right the wrongs. So with regards to the negotiation that's going through between Mauritius and UK, Mauritius has never showed any interest in making sure that our aspirations and our future are protected. It happened when the islands were dispossessed. They took their independence and compensation from the British government, and Chagosian people were allowed to suffer. So we asked the Mauritian government if the negotiation is going to go through, what we want to happen is to see within Mauritian law and within the transfer recommendation that our aspirations are protected. Similarly to our World model, they have their own constitution, their own governing council, and we want that. We want to have control over these islands under Mauritian sovereignty. If this doesn't happen, then we ask for a full referendum. The Falkland Islanders were given the choice to decide. We should be given the choice to decide. And with regards to the reparations, we ask the British government that full reparations have to be paid. The Seychelles Chagosians never received any compensation. But in spite of that, the meager compensation that were paid to the Mauritian Chagosians is not enough. So reparations means for the deportation, dispossession, and 50 years of continued mistreatment, maltreatment. We ask the British government to seriously consider this. The narrative will be pushed out within the public domain throughout the world that the British government imposed and discriminated and fought against its own people and never wanted to change its position, its policy with regards to its own people, to right an awful wrong that was done. So this is our message from the Seychelles Chagosian Committee. And we ask all Chagosians in Mauritius, especially in the UK, which indication is most will support a referendum if the Mauritian government doesn't change their position, if the Mauritian government doesn't show and put it within law that the aspiration of the Chagosians is going to be protected. And if the Mauritian government stays quiet, the referendum has to be done, and we ask the British government to consider this seriously. So this is our message, and we thank everyone for listening, and we ask the British government to take the report seriously. Thank you.
So Pierre is online, so we thank you very much, Pierre. So from his message, what comes out is that no one should be left behind. There needs to be meaningful and effective participation with all Chagosians, irrespective of whether they are Mauritius, in the UK, and in the Seychelles. And we could see that those who are in the Seychelles have never received compensation. They have never been invited to negotiations, so they're really left behind. And one of the recommendations that we have is to ensure that there's meaningful and effective participation with all Chagosians. Donc, message qui nous gagne de M. Pierre, c'est qu'il nous pas besoin de personne. Tout le monde besoin participer dans la conversation qui peut gagner autour de ma Chagosien. So, donc, Marcy earlier summarized the findings of the report, and as you can see, it's a very big report. It's 110 plus pages. And we also have recommendations, which I will request Bruno Stanrio to please go through. Donc, Marcy est à l'actif de nous examiner nos rapports, qui bien long, vous trouvez les 110 plus pages, beaucoup censés, si vous ne vous trompez. Et que nous avons aussi une recommandation d'un rapport là, qui Bruno pour go through avec nous, pour qui va mener nos recommandations dans différents gouvernements.
Merci à Jean-Yves. Bonjour, très heureux d'être avec vous. So, as is customary with every report published by Human Rights Watch, in addition to findings, we have recommendations. Recommendations are usually addressed to concerned governments, businesses, but also multilateral or regional organizations. In this particular case, following on the findings that have already been summarized by Mausi, our report also includes a number of tailored recommendations. Most of them are addressed to the two governments that we have identified as perpetrating the crimes against humanity against the Chagosian people. Now, in the interest of time, I will summarize them, so I won't go through the entire list. They are available on the report itself. Now, the central recommendation, of course, is around the necessity that both the governments of the UK and the US provide full, unconditional, and effective reparations to the Chagosian people, and that they do so after full and effective and meaningful consultations with all Chagosians. And I'd like to be very specific as to our recommendations with regards to what we mean by reparations. They entail 4 things. First, both governments must recognize and permit the immediate right of return to all Chagosians to live permanently in the Chagos archipelago, including Diego Garcia. And this applies to all Chagosians independently of their residency or nationality. Secondly, both governments must ensure that the Chagos Islands are restored so that Chagosians can live there permanently in dignity and in prosperity. Third, both governments must provide full compensation to all Chagosians everywhere in the world for all of the harms caused to them since 1965. And as we've heard, there has been some degree of compensation, but it's been incomplete and inadequate. And lastly, the last element of full and unconditional reparations is the fact that both governments must issue a guarantee of non-repetition of the crimes and abuses. Now, we also issue a joint recommendation to both governments to issue a full and unconditional apology for the abuses and crimes committed against the Chagosian people since 1965. And in the specific case of the United Kingdom, we're asking that that apology come from King Charles III himself. The reason being because the orders in Council instituting the British Indian Ocean Territory in 1965, as well as the 2004 orders in Council that prevented, again, the return of the Chagosians to the Bight, were issued by Queen Elizabeth II, using the monarchical institution of Privy Council in order to bypass Parliament. With regards to the UK, we have some specific recommendations to it. First, that it hold individuals responsible for crimes against humanity against the Chagosians, and that it do so through fair trials. Now, unfortunately, the United Kingdom has a rather sad record of holding officials to account for international crimes. There's also the issue of government and ministerial interference in investigations and prosecutions. So we're asking that the UK government ensure that the criminal justice system is fully independent, that the Attorney General will not be a member of government in order to ensure such independence. We're also asking the UK government to end the different treatment of peoples under UK rule. It is unconscionable, it is unacceptable that to this day, the Falklands, the South Georgia, the South Sandwich Islands, and the sovereign-based areas in Cyprus are treated differently from the Chagos and the Chagosians. We're also asking that the UK government hold a full and independent public inquiry into the crimes and violations committed against the Chagosians. And we're asking both governments to also release all documentation, whether it's confidential or not, with regards to the treatment, the deportation of the Chagosians. Much of the documentation that is already on the public record manifests that there is clear racist intent by the UK government, and so we want all of this documentation to be freely accessible in a database. With regards to the UK, finally, we're asking that they cooperate with and comply with the findings and recommendations of United Nations bodies and human rights mechanisms. This is important because the United Kingdom was engaged in fabrications and manipulations and disinformation to the UN decolonization processes. So the UK owes to right its record with the United Nations. And lastly, that the United Kingdom must ensure that all Chagosians who worked on Chagos, including for the plantations, are paid pensions, and that these pensions are backdated for those who have not received them. Specific recommendations to the US government include, on the one hand, that it allow the use of the airfield in Diego Garcia for civilian flights to assist Chagosians in resettling, that it immediately allow and lift any remaining legal restrictions and publicly encourage Chagosians to work on the military base, including the possibility of them bringing their families with them, and also that the US government commits to not allow renditions, detentions, or interrogations on Chagos, and to allow independent investigations of any detention facilities that may exist on Chagos. We're also asking the United States Congress to hold hearings into international crimes and other human rights abuses committed against the Chagosians, and the responsibility of successive U.S. administrations, as this goes back to the Lyndon Johnson administration. And we're also asking the United States to adopt legislation implementing crimes against humanity into U.S. criminal law, including providing for universal jurisdiction. We also have a limited number of recommendations addressed to the governments of Mauritius and Seychelles. We are asking both of them to publicly express their support for full and effective reparations by the UK and US governments to all the Chagosian people. And we're asking both of them to publicly call for effective accountability for those responsible for crimes against humanity committed against the Chagosian people. Specifically to the government of Mauritius, we're asking that it also repeat its public declarations that it fully supports the right of all Chagosians to return, regardless of their residency or nationality. And in light of the negotiations that now have been started, or conversations between the government of Mauritius and the government of the United Kingdom, to which India and the United States have been mentioned as possible interested or concerned parties, we're asking all four of them to ensure that whatever conversations or negotiations are happening, that they must be centered on the Chagosian people themselves. They must have meaningful, full, and effective consultations with Chagosians everywhere. And that whatever agreement is stricken must include full reparations, unconditional reparations for all Chagosians everywhere. And this means non-repetition of the crimes, full compensation, full restitution of the islands, and of course the right to return to all islands, including Diego Garcia. We have some other recommendations addressed to other states, members of the United Nations, European Union, African Union, also to specific businesses that might be somehow participating in the provision of services or goods to Diego Garcia or to Bayot, but in the interest of time, I will dispense with those. And to close, let me just say that the irony and tragedy of the plight of the Chagosians is that it is fully within the power of the governments of the United Kingdom and the United States to immediately cease the commission of these crimes against humanity. All that it requires is them permitting the right of return, of allowing them full compensation, restoration, and obviously non-repetition of these abuses. It is just a matter of political will. Through political will, they can repair the damage done, they can right the wrongs, and they can end the nightmare now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Donc, il va pas difficile pour summariser tout ça que Bruno a dit, mais essentiellement de recommandations clés. Il y a 5 affaires, 5 grandes recommandations qu'il nous fait. Premier, c'est le droit de retour. Donc, tout le monde a aussi un époque pour ce qui était le droit de retour à tout le monde de Chagos, incluant Diego Garcia. Deuxième, le gouvernement Angleterre, Amérique, ils ont fait en sorte qu'ils mandent dans Chagos, dans l'État que les Chagossiens vivent là-bas. Troisième, ils ont une compensation adéquate. C'est la compensation qu'ils donnent, mais ils n'ont pas assez. Et nous trouvons les pierres, les Chagossiens dans Seychelles, pas aucune compensation. Troisièmement, je vous ai donné une garantie être avec comme ça, pas pour répéter. Jamais. Et quatrièmement, je vous ai demandé pardon à ma Chagossienne. Le cinquième, sorry, on y est compté. Donc, c'est qu'il voulait finir sur ma recommandation pour dire que ces affaires qui disaient, c'est volonté politique. Je parle avec un pays américain et l'Angleterre, car avec sa manipulation qui est arrivée là, existe par volonté politique et pour faire en sorte qu'il y a 5 recommandations qui m'ont dit là, de l'avant. Donc, ça amène-nous à une fermeture de nos procédures formelles. Nous pouvons ouvrir la liste de questions, c'est ma question. So this brings us to an end of the presentations that we have prepared, and we'll take some questions from the floor if you have any. While you're asking the question, please state your name and where you work. We'll also take questions online, but if there are any, please let me know. Quand on pose question, c'est dire le nom et cause de travail ou seulement de la communauté chagossienne pour nous connaître aussi votre question à venir. Merci. Vincent, tu passes le micro. Vincent est fait.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sabrina Jean, chairperson of the Chagos Refugees Group in the UK. My question today, I would like to thank Human Rights for everything they had worked with us, especially in Mauritius, UK and the Seychelles. It was a good job, but I would like to know what will be the next step now. Thank you.
Maybe we can take 3 questions and then we do answers and we proceed.
Good morning, I'm Alexandre Corbeau, journalist for Le Journal des Archives magazine. My question is, if I heard you right, you said that in December the different governments had a chance to give their comments. Maybe if you can already say what has been said, what is important and what they have responded, and if in your report you have addressed these comments or you have only put these comments as such in the annex. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Boucher from the Mauritius. As you know, negotiation has started between Mauritius and Bermuda. I think the Prime Minister has based, and both Prime Minister has met or spoken on phone these days. How do you feel about that?
Okay, maybe we could respond to these 3 questions.
Yes, thank you. I'll take the first one from Sabrina. So you're absolutely right. Today, actually, our journey doesn't end, it actually continues. So what we've done now is we have the findings in the report, and as of today, what we're doing is engaging in advocacy, so reaching out to the UK government, the US government, the Mauritian government, and other concerned and interested governments. We're sharing our recommendations with them. We're having as many high-level meetings as possible. And the idea for us, as of today, is to engage with our report going forward so that as many of the recommendations that we have identified are actually implemented by the concerned governments. To give you an idea, so we're having meetings not only here in Port Louis with the US, the UK missions, also with the Office of the Prime Minister, but we're also engaging in meetings in Washington, D.C., in London, and we will continue doing advocacy meetings in New York at the United Nations, in Brussels vis-à-vis the European Union, and we wouldn't like to rule out possibilities before the African Union. So please bear with us, but in the coming weeks and months, we will certainly increase the advocacy pressure on the concerned governments so that they right the wrongs. And we're obviously looking forward to continuing to work with all Chagosian groups as we bring the pressure on them.
And I'll respond to the second question about the responses from the 3 governments that we wrote to. Both the Mauritian government and the UK government largely simply addressed the compensation question. We had a list of questions for them about how much was paid and how and when they were paid. Nothing substantially changed what we had found, so there was no reason to change any of that in the summary of our findings. The US government responded to acknowledge receipt of the letter and to reiterate their commitment to the promotion and respect of human rights across the world. We did not receive any response beyond that. But we have since understood, as Bruno said, as we continued our engagement with the different governments. The report itself is just the beginning. We have been told that the US government will now haven't had the opportunity to read the report be able to comprehensively respond after internal consultations on all of this. So we expect that we would receive more, whether directly to us or in public statements made by the different officials of the three governments.
So they received questions, not the report?
Not the report. So they received a summary of the findings, and then we put questions to them because we couldn't print a report without a response from them. Part of our methodology is that we give them the chance to respond to the findings that we got from talking to other people. And some of them, as I explained, were able to respond to some of those findings and the questions, but the US did not, at least for now.
Before I end to you, Olivier, for the negotiation question. So since November the 3rd, when we heard that the negotiations are going to happen, we've had outputs. And one of the press releases that we had called for meaningful and effective participation. So this is what we feel about it. Like, whatever the governments are deciding, please let's make sure that we include fractions from all Chagosian groups. And as you can see from Pierre's message, that Seychelles, Chagosians have not been included. So meaningful and effective participation. This is what we feel about the negotiations. I don't know, you've been to the negotiation, no, you've been to the pre-talks, I think, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about it, about how you feel about it.
Yeah, as we said, as other group also, we totally think that it's so important that we need to be included in any negotiation, because we don't want a repetition of what happened in 1965, where the decision had been taken without consulting us. But now I can say that there is a way of communicating between the UK government and Mauritian government also. We have both been invited. We met first of all with the Prime Minister, and to just because we have lots of questions to ask, and he assured us that the negotiation is at a stage where they discussing about sovereignty. As far as it will concern about all other issues regarding international subjects that have not been solved, such as former habitant, of course we will be on part of it. And we got a guarantee that the government, Mauritian government, will support, always said, because he said it in the resolution, that he will support resettlement on Chagos, including Diego Garcia. Okay? And because it's clear that what had been done to us is it's unlawful. And I can say also that I totally agree with Pierre, but I'm not on the same point concerning referendum. Why? I don't think that self-determination is more important, that referendum is more important than self-determination. Because self-determination will play that we have our role to play. But we said that because if the matter had been brought forward to the General Assembly of the United Nations and then refer to the International Court of Justice, and an advisory opinion had been given, even it's not binding, and apart from that we have a judgment of the International Court of the Sea, who said clearly that the sovereignty is Mauritius. Now, we cannot say that we are not against, we are against negotiation. I think that the negotiation should continue to take place, but with the implication of the Chagosian people. Because we cannot say, we need to know in what direction we are going. We cannot say that, like some say that they are asking for to stop the negotiation, and they want to be inside the negotiation. But which is which? We need to be clear on that. Either we participate, or you don't participate. Our point of view is very clear on that. For more than 50 years, we have never seen the goodwill of the UK government. If really there was a goodwill of the UK government, instead of letting me go to court to challenge them on a legal case, they will come to negotiate with us. But it was not the case. This is why we have been bringing cases against the UK government. Until now, even we won. They don't take in consideration. Now they decided last November to open negotiation with Mauritius. Let's give it a chance. We cannot believe on what they said, but of course, let's give them the chance. Because it's so important that if they realize that they want to bring a solution to all wrongs that we have been suffered, let's give it a chance and let's see how it works.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Olivier. We also have okay, maybe Bruno first, and then we'll go to Pierre if he wants to say anything.
Sure, yeah, just on the issue of negotiations, they are beyond the mandate of Human Rights Watch as they pertain to the sovereignty question. Exactly. But where they are within our mandate is with regards to the fact that there need to be full, meaningful, and effective consultations with all Chagosian groups. And in that regard, for example, the so-called engagements that the United Kingdom government has had with some Chagosian groups last week do not rise to the bar of full, meaningful, and effective consultations. So the UK needs to step up its game with regards to how it will consult with all Chagosians.
Thank you, Bruno. Pierre, do you have anything you would like to contribute?
Yes, I do. I've listened to the whole session and it's been extremely interesting. There's some new information from my side.
So he's gone.
There's been a lot of discussion.
We stopped here. You can continue, sorry.
So there's been a lot of meetings within all groups. With the inclusion of Mr. Olivier over the last week or so, and including last one with Lord Dossier last week on the 9th, and to pass on our views and to express our thinking, our concern about the process of negotiations going to go through this week going through. So I agree with Mr. Olivier on many points. And that generally includes and needs to be included in the negotiation process. But I'm also surprised that because he's already been part of that process. He's met with Prime Minister, and he's been able to transmit certain information, certain concerns and response to the Prime Minister that supposedly or hopefully the Mauritian government will put in front of the British government. Anyway, we're not sure how this is going. But the human rights report requires that there should be inclusion of all groups, not just you. All groups doesn't mean diverse opinions, diverse, everybody's looking for different things. We all, one very, very strong impression I got in the meeting on the 9th with Lord Bolton, the Minister for Overseas Territories and Energy and Climate Change and all that, is that there's consensus, one direction of thought of what we find should be from now on the direction to have in store. From our side, and we understand what the conclusion of the ICJ report, we understand the went into the recommendation, we understand that there needs to be a colonization process, and it was not fully done. But history, meaning what happened to the Chagos, when the Chagos Central report was located from Chagos way back in 1955. History right now is beginning to tell. We being excluded again. And unfortunately, with all respect, the Mauritian government wait.
Pierre, unfortunately the sound system is not working well in the room, maybe if you can, okay, we can hear you now, if you can just summarize.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
So anyway, history was not done right by us. We don't want a repetition now. We want an inclusion on that same thing.
Yeah.
We can find the right people here and my cousin, in the paper and those in the paper, and I'm sure people from UK can sit at that table. The Falkland Islands were given the option to choose. We should also be given the option to choose. While understanding the UN and the attitude of the decolonization, the Mauritius has a very significant responsibility to make sure that our spirits forward are respected and don't be in the line of our thoughts, of our direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pierre. So the connection was not very stable when you spoke, but what we did, and like what I did get from your intervention, and just to summarize for the people in the audience, is that history should not repeat itself, and that we need to include even Chagosians from Seychelles and everywhere to make sure that there's full, meaningful, and effective participation. Any more questions from the?
Without the military base, for example, what Bolshevik is in favor of the military base, and what do you think about it?
Go ahead.
So Human Rights Watch is not opposed to the fact that the military base may continue, but that military base cannot obviously preclude the right of the Chagosians from returning to the Chagos archipelago, including Diego Garcia. And we see no reason why Chagosians cannot be employed at the military base, why Chagosians are discriminated. And so this is where the UK and the US must revisit and allow Chagosians not only to live permanently in Diego Garcia, as in every other island, but also to find sources of employment, and as I mentioned, of actually facilitating the base for the resettlement of Chagosians into the archipelago.
If I can just add, and this is something that came from Chagosians themselves when we did our interviews, that they do not mind the military base there as long as they can get a job and function around it. Yes, Olivier?
Yeah, it's been very clear for us because even we have the US military base in Diego Garcia, that will not prohibit people to leave because up to now we have cohabitation. We have cohabitation because we have Filipinos, Singaporeans, Sri Lankans, and others can work and live on the place, whereas we is what is not is unfair. This is why we say that priority should be given to us instead of others. And if I just take the example of the feasibility studies of KPMG, we state clearly that there is no legal barrier to prevent Chagosian to return on Chagos, including Diego Garcia. Because our claim is very clear. This is why in the meeting that took place last week, my question to the UK government, to the Minister Goldsmith, will the UK government support resettlement on Chagos, including Diego Garcia? I did not have any reply from that. You know, to show that they don't have any goodwill to make this happen. Because we have never asked for the closure of the US military base. And to take that, it should be clearly understood that only 1/3 of Diego Garcia is being used as US military base. 2/3 is being unoccupied. Where Chagosian used to live, it's more than 45 minutes away from the base. And in 1 week, CBs can build more than many prefabric houses for people, for civilians in Diego Garcia. Why not Chagosian? And this is why we insist it will not be possible that resettlement build only on Peros and Salomon. It should be including also Diego Garcia for those who want to live and stay there.
Just to add on the military base, as I did mention, however, we're not opposed to it, but it should not be used as a center for detention, renditions, interrogation, and that if there's any detention facility within it, it must be open for international inspections.
Thank you very much. Bruno, we have 3 minutes, so we can take one more question. Yes, is there any? Yeah. Okay, so
C'est bon, vous m'entendez? Oui, Abdullah de RFI et de France 24. I would like to know what triggers your interest for a research investigation now and not before. This story has been ongoing for more than 50 years.
Thank you. You want to respond first? We can take the gentleman here.
I'm there from the Quotidien in Afrique. I wanted to know from your survey you've been conducting, and for the fight Mr. Macron has been doing for some years. Do you know how many persons want to resettle in the Chagos?
Thank you.
Susan. Okay, there's one more.
Excuse me, I speak in Creole because one friend can understand and another one can translate for me. Et pour moi, je vais dire un grand merci à Human Rights pour ce travail que vous avez fait. Et avec tous les amis que vous avez interviewés, ils ont vu l'Afrique comme si ce qu'ils ont dit, ont raconté, ils ont vu les images aujourd'hui. Et j'espère que là où on va continuer à travailler ensemble. Et on attend beaucoup de vous aussi parce que vous êtes très haut. Vous pouvez porter notre voix et tout ce qu'on a raconté. Et on va travailler ensemble pour qu'on puisse aller de l'avant pour qu'on puisse retrouver notre île aussi vite. Merci.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll just translate what Susan.
Yeah, let's take that one last
okay,
one.
I'll take one
that's
last
it.
one and then we'll close.
In the report, do you say something about sovereignty over the islands? I think, no, just wanted to ask the questions. Have you said something about sovereignty over the islands? Thank you.
I'll answer that very quickly. Sovereignty is completely outside of our mandate as an international human rights organization, and so that question is not addressed at all in our report. So I'll go to the very first question, one that our interest in carrying out this research was triggered by a number of factors. One is that this is not actually the first time Human Rights Watch would weigh in on this subject. We have submitted an amicus brief to the court in the European Court of Human Rights when this matter came up. And to be honest, as I mentioned in my summary earlier, we were quite disappointed in some of the somewhat contradictory court decisions that have emerged from the UK courts, the ECHR itself, over the years. And then when the International Court of Justice released its advisory opinion, and the response from the UK, particularly the public response, but also what we had heard from the US side, became for us a matter of concern, because these two major powers in the world present themselves as somewhat of a moral standard when it comes to respect for human rights across the world. And we thought at that time that it was important to cast a human rights lens on the struggles, but also the harms and the suffering that the Chagosian community have gone through over the years. And honestly, it's just simply shocking that we're approaching the 50th year of the anniversary of the last forcible removal from Chagos, and the question of Chagosians' ability to return to live on the islands remain unsolved. That for us was a key challenge as we saw that the years were approaching, and the generations that actually witnessed and experienced those removals are gradually dying off. we thought it was the perfect timing for us to weigh in and present this in a way that we hope will get the attention of the international community and the two big powers that are responsible for these crimes to finally do the right thing.
Thank you, Marcy.
I'm happy to take the question as to how many might want to resettle. I think it's important to answer in a legal way. That question, in fact, doesn't hold much relevance because all Chagosians, independently of their residency or nationality, have the right to return to the Chagos archipelago, including Diego Garcia. Now, some Chagosians may not want to exercise that right immediately, and that is within their right. But what is unconscionable, unacceptable, is that the UK and the US governments are preventing Chagosians from exercising that right. So this is not a numbers game. It is a right, and that right cannot be prevented, lifted, excised by governments.
Yeah, my answer to the how many people want to return. The question of, it's our rights. Everyone has the right to go because everyone wants to know where they come from. Why not Chagosian? And just take one example. David Vine, US University, make a survey nearly, let's say about 15 years ago, where 89% of Chagosian want to return to Chagos. I cannot forget to mention about what happened in 2016 when UK government presented the support package. The support package was supposed not to encourage resettlement on Chagos, but to improve the condition of living of every Chagosian wherever they are. More than 6 years now, nothing had been done to improve the condition of living of Chagosian. And I had to mention that when the feasibility studies mention about Chagosian, there is no legal barrier to prevent Chagosian, the UK government did its own survey to exactly know how many people want to return. And he just mentioned it that 98% Chagosian want to return to Chagos. But he never did anything on that, you see. And up to now, concerning the support package, it's only most money has been spent on heritage visit. How could we, as belongers described by the High Court of Justice in London, instead of consider us as belongers, they want us to be visitors? How could they encourage our people, our brothers and sisters, our children, to come over to UK, but not have the right to go to Chagos? It's something that we want to know. It's very important because our rights remain our rights. It's up to anyone. If you want to go, you want to visit, but your right is your right, like a person who have the right to vote. It's for him to decide whether he will vote or not. But it is a fundamental right that everyone should respect. You cannot just invite me at your place, but you are not allowed me to go at my place and to live freely on my birthplace. This is not fair.
I think that's a very good way to wrap up this session. We're unfortunately running 5 minutes behind time. Madame Suzelle, I will summarize what you said, but I just want to thank everyone present here, especially the journalists who came out and the supporters of the cause, our technical support team. Thank you very much. You have been busy since yesterday. We really appreciate the hard work that you have done. And our team from Human Rights Watch, Ife, Vincent, Meredith, Birgit, thank you very much for making sure that our event is a success. And my last group is Chagosians, because for us, this report would not have been possible without your participation. Madame Souza rightly said that she was happy with our collaboration, and she now saw the fruits of the interaction that we had through the videos and in the report, and she looks forward to working with us to make sure that the cause is taken even further. And this is what we want to do. We want to make sure that we can help you move this cause even further. So thank you very much for hosting us, for showing us your culture, for feeding us your food. I was lucky to be one of those who ate the food. I'm Mauritian. Moi, ça vous êtes créole. Mauritienne, moi. Mais vraiment, je mange manger les Chagos jusqu'à l'année dernière. Oui, comme on vient CRG. L'accueil qui nous gagnait, c'était vraiment impressionnant. Merci, merci, merci beaucoup pour tout ça qu'ils ont donné nous. Et mon premier épisode, peut-être, pas pour les États-Unis, pas pour les États-Unis, mais nous, la guerre, we will make sure that nos recommandations nous popularisent, and we will have discussions with the different governments. Et I wish you all the best, and hopefully very soon, bientôt, je vous trouve dans Chagos.
Final word from Pierre?
Pierre, Marcy, sorry. Pierre, thank you very much also, and it's unfortunate that you could not be with us today, but we thank you for your time and also for spending time with Marcy when she was in Seychelles to make sure that our report is done through meaningful, effective, and full participation of all Chagosians. And we really hope very soon we're able to do some advocacy meetings together and meet you in person. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, Monsieur Olivier wants the last word.
Bien content. I would like to thank the Human Rights Watch team for the powerful report. Because it shows all that our demands, not only from us but from other groups, clearly mention about all wrongs that have been done to us, and what we hope that those government concerned will fulfill their responsibility toward our Chagosian people. Je suis content de dire ça en créole. Je remercie Human Rights Watch qui fait un travail avec plusieurs groupes pour faire que ce rapport-là un rapport vraiment une valeur qui ne peut pas montrer. Et moi, j'espérais que l'autorité concernée pour prendre cette responsabilité vis-à-vis de tout l'engagement qui ce rapport-là peut demander. Bon, Human Rights Watch, c'est une organisation internationale qui est reconnue concernant les droits de l'homme, mais je pense que chacun peut prendre ses responsabilités et faire quelque chose qu'on a besoin de faire et courir tout dans la justice, qu'on a besoin de demander pardon.